And if we caught the spirit of that, the spirit, I mean the feeling, the essence of that opening treatment, then we have what the ideas of today are all about. And the title of the talk is From the Absolute to the Personal. From the Absolute to the Personal. It's like there's this continuum, and on the one end you have the absolute, which is ineffable, it is unknowable, it is so big, it is so vast, it can hardly be understood. And then on the other extreme, the other end of the continuum, we have the personal, which can be egocentric, which can be so wrapped around itself that it is the center of its own universe and nothing else matters. It can't even consider anything beyond itself. So that's where we want to go to. We want to figure out in this range, from extreme to extreme, where do I fit? What is the part I play? What is the part I have been created to play? Does it matter? Does it even matter? Should it matter? What happens to me if I can find that? So that's where we're going to. We're kind of exploring these ideas. And the first point I'd like to ask you to consider is that which we call a virtue is really at the center of the two vices that make up the extreme of a continuum. So just like we talk about the continuum, on one end we have the absolute, on the other end we have the egotistical personal. We have these examples in many areas of our life. And that which we call a virtue is that which kind of fits, boom, dead at the center of these two extremes. So, for example, let's take prosperity. Let's take money as an example, because it has been very vilified over the years and misquoted. We're told money is the root of all evil, and it's not. It's the love of money. It's the attachment to money that is the root of all evil. But on the one extreme, when it comes to money, there could be, a looseness with money, spendthrifting, just kind of spend every nickel you have and then borrow more, kind of an idea, squandering of money, or kind of in the New Testament terms, we have the prodigal son who went off and wasted his inheritance on wine, women, and song. We spend it on frivolous things. And we would say in our society, we would say, well, that's a vice. That is an indulgence. That is too much of something. And on the other hand, on the other end of that extreme, you have being a miser. You read these stories in the paper that are incredible. That they find a homeless person who died, and they had millions of dollars in a bank account somewhere. Or people who died and they had their money stuffed in a mattress, and they pretty much starved to death, and yet they had enough money in the mattress to live comfortably for years and years and years. But they were afraid to spend it. They were so attached to it, they couldn't let go of it. And that is the other extreme. So you have these two extremes of being too frivolous with money and being too frugal with money. And right in the center, you have kind of a vice, which is understanding and accepting money for what it is, a medium of exchange, a divine idea, a tangible symbol of God's supply in operation, moving through our life, you see. So, and when we think of it in those terms, there's no need to hoard or attach or worry about where it's going to come from and all of those things, because it is a symbol of God's supply in our life. Nor is there any need to be frivolous and spend too much of it. There's always enough and plenty. See, and it's not about getting, and it's not about spending. It's simply about being in that flow. That's where we might say the virtue is. So we come to this idea then of where am I in the universe? Where am I in God's scheme of things? What am I in God's scheme of things? Do I even matter? Does the individual personality even matter? And of course, this has kind of been an interesting development as you go through studying human history, human nature over the thousands of years for which we have it recorded. And we have to understand that there are thousands of years before that we don't have a recording of it. But there's kind of a couple of orientations towards life, and in some cultures the society is what is important. The culture is important. The race is important, and the individual's importance is is only is only based on the fact that they are a part of that culture. They are a part of that race. You know, the race continues on, the culture continues on, but the individual kind of comes and the individual kind of goes. And there's this idea then that the community is more important than the individual. The individual would sacrifice himself or herself for the community, for the good of the community, would do whatever it is for the good of the community. The good of the whole supersedes the good of the individual. And we see that even in our democratic societies, which tend to focus more on the rights of the individual, or at least talk about it, the rights of the individual. But still there's times where an individual may be called upon to sacrifice their own freedoms, to even sacrifice their lives for the good of the whole. So you have on the one extreme, you have this idea that the individual, the human individual is not so very important, but the collective whole of that society, whatever that society happens to be. Now keep in mind that even with that definition of society is a segregated one, in that it refers only to that particular group of people, whoever they happen to be. But it is that particular group of people apart from and different than perhaps their neighbors, perhaps the tribes and the cultures and the nations and the religions around them. Okay. So you can kind of even see some of this idea surfacing back in the earliest writings that we have in our religious tradition in the West. And we have this idea that there were a chosen people, that there was a group of people who were the chosen people, and they weren't like the other people. And a lot of what we read in the Old Testament is an explanation of why the chosen people weren't like those other people over there. Didn't worship golden calves, didn't sacrifice their children, didn't believe in human sacrifice. That's what Abraham and Isaac going up the mountain were. The story is all about. We don't do that. We don't sacrifice our children. Our God doesn't require us to do that. It was a teaching story that works on many different levels. So on the one hand, we have this idea that, you know, the individual is not so very important, but it is the society that is important, and yet that society is somehow separate and apart and different than other societies and other cultures. It perceives itself. Interestingly, if you kind of read about the different peoples of the earth and the name that they have for themselves, many times, no matter what the language, many times the word that the people have to describe themselves means the first people or the original people. In other words, we're the real deal. We're the original people. We're the real ones. Everybody else came after. They're different than we are, see? And the only point I'm making is that there's even in this idea where the individual as an individual doesn't matter, doesn't need to be differentiated. Right? So you can see the caste systems even, you know, if you remember that caste, well, you do what you're supposed to do in that caste. Yet there's different castes that do different things. So even in the societies where the individual as an individual was not considered to be unique, perhaps, but just kind of a member of the whole, even in those societies, that society perceived itself to be unique. There was a sense of apartness and a sense of separateness. You swing over to the other end of the extreme, where you can kind of get to the point where the rugged individual perhaps is kind of the ideal that people aspire towards or admire, at least, and kind of perhaps even mythologically believe that such a being exists. But you can even kind of over-rotate to an overly important sense of self, you know. that it is the individual self that is the only important thing that matters, and that everybody else in in society, to that person, to that individual, everyone and everything else in society, is its only value is with regard to what does it do for me? What can I get out of it? What have you done for me lately, kind of thing. In business, it doesn't matter how much you sold last year. It's how much did you do for me in the last 30 days. We used to do that all the time in business. We would go in and we would look at 30, 60, 90 days. What are we going to do in 30, 60, 90 days? What did we do in the last 30, 60, 90 days? And that was our horizon. That's as far as we could see. Now, it was a 5-year strategic plan, which everybody kind of read, but nobody kind of worried too much about, because they had their heads down and they were focused on 30, 60, 90 days. Now, if we take this idea of, where is the value of the individual? Perhaps another way to put it is what might a spiritual concept of the self, the individual I, what might a spiritual concept of that be? What I want to do is I want to kind of raise this up to the cosmic level, So keep in mind that even in the human concept of collectivism, where the individual is not so important, but the society is important, there was a sense of separation in that society itself was separate from others, a sense of apartness. And when you go to the egotistical I, where the only thing that matters is me and what I have and what I can get and how I can get other people to give it to me, there's a sense of separateness. There's a sense of apartness. There's a sense of otherness. Other people don't matter. What matters is me. What matters is what I get. So both of these ideas are tied into a sense of separateness, a sense of apartness. Now we take that up to the cosmic level. So I want you to do like Emerald, and bam, I want you to take it up a notch, and think for a moment of just how incredibly vast, how magnificent this universe is. We look at the pictures. I love to look at the pictures from Hubble. We had a meteor shower this week, and I lived in the southeast for many years, and I don't think I've ever seen the meteor shower in August, because it's always overcast. Just the nature of the weather. But you can go on the web now and you can see spectacular photographs. People who live out in areas where the sky is clear are posting these photographs. And it's just absolutely incredible when you think of how vast the universe is. And if you look at the pictures from Hubble and you see all these little tiny dots of light that are out there, and then if you zoom in on that picture, you realize they're not a tiny dot of light. They're entire galaxies. But they're so far away that they just look like a little pinpoint, in the picture until you magnify it. And you start to think that each one of these galaxies is, millions or billions of stars. Carl Sagan used to say billions and billions in cosmos. We start to get this feeling for just how insignificant or how tiny it seems that planet Earth is in the scheme of all this. We look out there and we understand, that we can't see everything that there is out there. We don't have the technology to see, nor is it possible by the laws of physics to see everything that is out there. And this, if you read the email, I get a chuckle, because every once in a while they'll come on in the news. The news loves to take a little fact and then just blow it into a headline, and they say, we're about to be able to see to the edge of the universe, to the edge of the universe. Really? That which is infinite has an edge? Where is the edge of the infinite, What's going to be there? A big sign? Universe ends here, proceed with caution, No, what it means is that there's a the scientists call it a horizon. There's a horizon that we can't see beyond. But the laws of physics, as we know them at this time, prevent us from seeing beyond this horizon. So it's like going to the beach and looking out over the water, At some point, you can't see any further. At some point, there's a perceptible line, perceptible to your eye. There's a perceptible line, and if you look around, it draws a perfect circle. It draws a perfect circle. If you were on a boat far enough offshore and you just sat on that boat and you turned your head, and you rotated around 360 degrees, the horizon would draw a perfect circle. And that's why in some cultures the circle is a sacred geometrical symbol, In our Native American cultures, the teepees were that way because the base formed a circle. The camp was made in a circle. The fire was made in a circle. The sun made a circle. The moon made a circle. The horizon made a circle. And there was something mystical and something magical about the circle. So we know if we go to the ocean and we sit on the deck of a small boat and we look around, we see this horizon, and it is physically impossible for us at that point to see any further. Now, of course, there are things that we know we can do with the physical horizon. We can raise ourselves up higher. If we were on a taller ship, we could see further. If we could climb up the mast, we could see further. If we could get in a helicopter and go straight up, we could see further. But in the physical universe, as we know it, with the laws governing the speed of light and those sorts of things, there's a horizon. That's all I'm saying. There's a horizon that we can't see beyond. That's the edge of the universe that we're talking about. But there is no edge, you see. There is no end. There's just an end to what we can perceive, an end to what we can see at this point. You could argue, well, what would happen if I could magically send a spaceship that could travel that far and go to that horizon? Would it be like the ocean? Would I be able to see a next horizon, another horizon? And I think probably yes, but I don't know. My point is, it's bigger than we can comprehend. It is 15.7 billion light years, they think, in any direction. So we're sitting at the center of a sphere that we can perceive that's 15.7 billion light years in every direction, and yet there's more beyond that. And our mind, what is a light year? Can we even comprehend a light year? Can we even get our mind around that? Light travels 186,000 miles a second. 60 seconds to a minute, 60 minutes to an hour, 24 hours a day, 365 and a quarter days for a year, and do the math, and that's how far light's supposed to travel in 1 year. And then what is a billion? We can't, we can draw it out and we can count the zeros, but what is a billion? Do we really have a grasp for what a billion is? And then what is 15.7 billion? And then what is 31.4 billion? What is the vastness that we are talking about here? So we look at this vastness, and we see the pictures of planet Earth that are taken from spaceships that are traveling away from us, or perhaps we're traveling away from them. We see the pictures of this tiny little blue marble, the famous picture from the Apollo, taken by the Apollo astronauts on their way back from the moon. This little blue marble just hanging out into this vastness. Now we're getting pictures coming back to us from as far out as Saturn, and you can't even see that it's a blue marble. It's just kind of a speck of light that has a blue tint to it. And you can imagine what it would be like if we were to try to view planet Earth from, say, the edge of the horizon in space. It wouldn't even be perceptible. We wouldn't even see it. So what can happen to us is we can develop a sense of insignificance. What does it matter, We draw imaginary lines on our continents. We call them our countries, but eventually the continental plates are all going to fold back into the earth and be dissolved into molten material. We take the remains of our loved ones and we bury them respectfully in the ground, and yet the very ground that we bury them in is someday going to be gone. Someday the very planet that we're riding around in space on is going to be gone. Someday the very sun that warms us and grows our food is going to be gone. The very galaxy that our sun is part of is someday going to be gone, see. And if we start to think terms of the scale of the cosmos, the scale of God, the scale of the divine, we can develop a sense of apartness and separateness, and we can say, somehow I'm not included in all this. Somehow I'm a victim of all this. No matter how well I live my life, or how poorly I live my life, by whatever standard we judge well and poor, what difference does it make? What does it matter? A billion years from now, what will it matter? A million years from now, what will it matter? And we can lose hope, and we can lose sense of purpose, and we can lose our sense of belonging. We think then that omnipotence, omnipresence, that the divine mind takes all of this in, all of this which is so much bigger than our human mind can even conceive, and we start to wonder in that. Why would God even care about me? As it says in the New Testament, I think it was Paul said it. What is mankind that the divine would even be mindful of us? Why would the divine even take time out of all of this that's going on? Why would it even take time to pay attention to us, to know what we're doing, to care, to even care about us? So we can develop this sense of hopelessness, this sense of kind of everything's meaningless. We recognize that the divine being all that there is, and it knows only itself. It has no awareness of anything that is not like itself. So we have these conditions in our human lives. We have war, we have hostility, we have anger, we have all of these things that if we stop and think about what the divine mind must be like, as best as we can imagine, right? Because how could we know? How could we know what the vastness is like? How could we know what the ineffable is like? The unknowable. It doesn't stop us from claiming that we know what the unknowable one is like. But we really can't, and we really don't, you see. So God doesn't know pain or suffering. God doesn't know war. God doesn't know hostility. God doesn't know hate, and yet that is very much part of the human experience. And we say, how can that be? Does it matter? Does it matter to God that we suffer? Does it matter to God that there's war, there's cruelty, there's genocide, all these terrible things, And the only thing I'm trying to do is I'm not trying to give everybody a downer. I'm trying to say is there comes a point if apart from that vastness, that what God is, we can think of ourselves as being so insignificant that it doesn't matter. Swing to the other extreme, which is the egotism, the materialism, the greed, and the selfishness that we can see ourselves and human beings getting caught up in, right? We can completely lose sense of our place in the universe and our part in all of the vastness. So we so wrapped around the I, the egotistical I, that nothing else matters. Nothing else matters. I think it was Dale Carnegie said that the average person would care more about the sore on the back of their neck than they would of all the starving children in the world. Because it's personal. It's with them every day. Right? Every time they put their collar on, they're reminded that it hurts. And everything else is out of sight and out of mind. So we see that human beings, as human beings, have evolved also along this line of thinking that the self, the I self, is so important that it has to be satisfied, it has to be appeased, it has to be stroked and told how good it is and all these things. And in that sense of life, the I became so important that everyone else became unimportant, other than what could they do to serve this self. It is out of this self-serving sense of I, this self-serving sense of apartness, that everyone and everything just becomes a commodity to be used. You know, what can I get out of this? What does it mean for me? What can I do with this? This is what gave people the ideas. They could go out and enslave another human being because it's just a matter of, you know, what can I get out of it? What can they do for me? If I can enslave these people and make them work for me and they can make me rich, well, that's what I need to do, because there's this identification with the I, the self, being so darn important. And my point here is that we are at the complete other extreme, in that, at one extreme, the I is so unimportant that it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter, there's no purpose, there's no point. I think it was Osho I was reading who said there was actually cults at one time that promoted suicide as being the only reasonable alternative, you know, because everything was so hopeless. Why bother? You know, why struggle with it? And then, of course, the question became to the preachers of the cults. Well, you know, why don't you practice what you preach? And their answer is, well, we have to tell other people about it. But there's actually, you know, it's actually a case where sometimes people feel so hopeless they don't understand why am I here? What is the purpose? And the other extreme is that they lose such a sense of their belonging, such a sense of kind of being important in regards to a sense of importance in regards to what am I to the universe, that their sense of importance is only revolves around what am I to myself. See, what am I to myself? And they lose their connectedness. So in both extremes, we lose our connectedness. Both extremes could be considered to be a vice. And somewhere in the middle, we have to find the virtue. Somewhere in the middle, we have to find our balance. Somewhere in the middle, we have to find the part I play. Why am I here? So the ideas this morning kind of largely inspired by Fenwick Holmes. Fenwick Holmes was Ernest's brother, and he wrote a little book called Being and Becoming that is one of my favorites. Now, Fenwick is an interesting man in his own light, in that he started his career in the clergy as a Congregationalist minister. Now, the Congregationalists were kind of the remnants of the Puritans, you know, those fun-loving folks that we think of who came and founded Massachusetts Bay Colony and put people in stockades and branded them with the Scarlet Letter and all those kind of things that probably not fairly have been attributed to them. But that's where Fenwick was. He was a conventional minister. But as I say, you know, consciousness evolves from the orthodox to the Gnostic to the mystical, and Fenwick was certainly moving along that path. Fenwick's writings to me are a little bit clearer, a little bit more accessible than at times Ernest's, and I love Ernest Holmes' writings, don't get me wrong. But at times Fenwick has a way to say, you know, in a very few words, that which takes others a lot of words to say. Very, very clear. Just a couple personal notes. For those of you who have been around the movement for a while, you might know Dr. J. Scott Neal out in Fremont, California. And he was a personal student of Fenwick Holmes. He met Fenwick when, according to Dr. J, when Dr. J was a young hippie out in California. And Fenwick saw something in Dr. J and took him under his wing and used to give him personal lessons. But along with the personal lessons went a glass of goat milk. Fenwick was a strong believer that goat milk was good for the Constitution, and when Dr. J went to visit for his lesson, Fenwick would give him a glass of goat milk, which he didn't take too kindly to. So they finally had to reach a compromise in that they would put chocolate in the goat milk, so Dr. J could take it. He would drink down a glass of chocolate goat milk before their lesson. Fenwick, Fenwick used to say, according to Dr. J, Fenwick would say that when he died, he was going to leave a perfectly healthy body behind. And he did. He was in his 90s. He went out and he played a round of golf, 9 holes of golf on a Saturday morning, which was his usual custom. Went home and laid down on the couch to take his nap, which was his usual custom, and he left. He was gone, see. And I just wanted to point out in there that we don't have to get sick to die. We don't have to suffer to die. We have to understand our relationship to the universe and what role our bodies play in the life here on Earth plays. That's what we're talking about today, the part I play. So in this little book, Being and Becoming, Fenwick starts to is something new becoming part. We have to that this cosmic stuff of the universe. It is plastic, moldable, it is bend, shapeable. It is pure energy. And pure energy becomes and we are part of that. There is some part of God. There's nothing apart from God, nothing that is different than God. It is all part of God. So we want to take this idea. We want to take this idea when we are looking at the cosmos. That what we are looking at is we are looking at energy of the divine, of God, taking the form of universes and stars and planets and galaxies and planets and all of those things, and then going back into that pure energy, the undifferentiated differentiating itself, going back to the undifferentiated. We're seeing unfoldment. But none of the principle behind it, none of that would be happening. One of the questions that keeps coming up when you look at physics and they talk about the Big Bang, and of course there are other theories. There are other theories about what's going on, but there's this idea that at one time, everything that there was compressed in the head of a pin, and then something happened, and it expanded, and it kind of blew up, and it expanded, and it forms all of the matter that we see in the universe. And the question is, well, what started that? What kicked the can? What got it going? And there's all these different theories about that. And one I was listening to during the week is the scientist was saying, well, this thing that we recognize as the Big Bang is only within the horizon that we can see. But it is part of something much bigger, that the universe is constantly converting energy to matter and converting matter back to energy, and it is just the way it works, and it may be doing the same thing in multiverses in many different places. So we want to get this idea that this thing that we call God is much bigger than we can ever comprehend. But it hasn't forgotten us, you see. It is not that we do not matter. So on this planet Earth, we can look at all living creatures and we can recognize that there is a principle of life. There is something called life that is expressing itself in many different and unique ways. As you and I, as human beings, as dogs and cats, as plants and trees, there are many different ways that life is expressing itself, but it is the very principle of life. The commonality between all of these is that there is something invisible called life that is expressing itself through all of these different forms, through all of these different unique creations. Now, a very interesting thing for us to consider is that something is without knowing what it is or how it is. You know? And I want you to just think about it for a moment. We know that gravity is. Nobody can deny that. You step off a cliff, you're going to fall and get hurt, because gravity is. But when it comes down to saying, well, what is it? What is it? We don't know. We just don't know. Newton described it as a force of attraction between two bodies. It's a function of their mass and their separation, their distance from one another. And that formula works fine for us. It lets us do lots of things. It lets us send rocket ships to the moon and to the outer edges of the galaxy. Einstein came along and said, well, you know, mathematically that may describe how it works in most cases, but not all cases. But there is really no force. It is just an illusion of a force. So what is it? What is gravity? We don't know. We don't know. We're still trying to figure that out. We don't know. We measure it with a clock, but we don't know what it is. What is life? We don't know, but life is. So we know that life is. We know that life is expressing itself through all of its creation, but we don't know what life is. Fenwick tells us that scientists can take an acorn and they can analyze it and they can grind it up and they can identify each component and they can tell you exactly how much by percentage there is of certain different chemicals. And you can go to the store and you can buy the exact proportion of chemicals and you can put them into a little plastic mold that you make that looks exactly like an acorn components and put them in there. But it's not alive. It's not alive. There is something else that is working through it. And what we have to come to realize then is that there is something that is working through us. You and I did not create our own life. We would not be here if there was not something else working through us. And what is that something but spirit? But God itself. So we have God at the one concept, which is the absolute, which we might think of too vast and has too much going on to even know or to care about ourselves. And then we have to say, but how does the divine experience itself? How does it express itself? How does it know itself? As us, to experience its magnificence as us, to experience its love as us. The divine loves by means of you and I. The divine loves you by means of me. The divine loves me by means of you. When you hug your beloved, it is the divine. to recognize that I am one with everything, because I am the point in consciousness where the divine has come to recognize itself. We understand, to the best of our understanding, that the way that the divine creates is the divine creates through a mental process. Yeah. In Book of Genesis, we're told God said in different cultures, different things about the divine command, but there's kind of this general idea that since the divine does not have arms and legs and hands and feet like we do, even though we are its arms and legs and hands and feet here on this earth, but in the beginning, in the beginning of a creative process, it is thought. It is its thought that is creative. The divine says, let it be, and something happens that takes the unformed and brings the unformed into the form that is the perfect outpicturing of what the divine said to let be. And it has created us in that image and likeness, and our thought is creative as well. Which means that we, either knowingly or unknowingly, we create the circumstances in our lives. If we believe life to be cruel and untrustworthy, we have that experience. If we believe life to be good and trustworthy, we have that experience. So now we come to this question of, well, what is the part I play, and then how do I use this creative power that I have no choice but to use, right? The fact that what I too think is creative, what I too think produces different experiences. And this brings us back to then our purpose in life. The divine has created each and every one of us out of itself, not as an insignificant, inconsequential, tiny little creature on this blue marble that is so small that if you get far enough away, it doesn't even exist. But it has created each and every one of us out of itself as a means of experiencing the magnificence of its own creation. You know, I love thinking of a small child, how curious they are, how everything is new and everything is wonderful, and they just want to learn, they want to grow, they want to get their little hands into everything, especially the stuff that you tell them not to touch, right? What is that? Why can't I touch that? They have to know. The curiosity is just compelling. It just compels them to grow, right? The children have no choice but to grow, because there is this life principle, this force that is pushing through them, and causing them to seek out new and wonderful things. And each and every one of us is that child. Each and every one of us is that creative, curious expression of God's life, who goes out and discovers just how magnificent life is, and the divine is enjoying and celebrating its own creation as us. This is what Fenwick is telling us. You are the point where God is celebrating itself. Can you accept that? Can you believe that? You are the point in consciousness where God is celebrating itself. And it has given you this power to use your thought, to use what you put your mind on, in order to create experiences in your life. So very quickly, let me explain the difference between creative thought and creative mind. Creative mind is what does the work. Creative thought is what produces the avenue or the channel through which the work is done. Ernest Holmes tells us that the purpose of treatment, the purpose of affirmative prayer, is to produce an avenue or a channel in consciousness through which the creative power of the universe, the creative mind, does its work. So as I said, we don't really know what gravity is. We can describe to some extent how it works, but we really don't know why it works. So 1,000 years ago, outside of Phoenix, a group of people lived there who disappeared one day. Well, probably not one day, but they're no longer there. They're the Anasazi, the ancient people, and you can go visit the ruins. And these people were very intelligent people. I'm sure that they didn't understand calculus. Newton hadn't even been born yet when they lived there, but they understood gravity. They understood gravity to the point of knowing that water flows downhill. Now, they may not have known why water flows downhill. They may not have been able to express it on pencil and paper, but sure enough, they knew that water flows downhill. And what they did was they created their little village on a slope and next to a stream. And as the water was flowing downhill, they went and they cut a channel from that stream, and they cut a channel through their fields. And they cut a series of channels through their fields, irrigation channels. So by the power of gravity, which they didn't understand, but they could use, by the power of gravity, water itself, consider the gravity pushing the water downhill as being creative mind. The creative mind itself, the force of gravity, pushed the water through the channels that they had created. By a deliberate intention, they had created these channels. And the water flowed through their fields, and eventually went back in and joined the stream downstream. Deliberately, they created a channel. Deliberately, they created a channel. And that's all they had to do. The creative power of gravity did the rest. So what you and I must do is deliberately create a channel in consciousness in order to produce the wonderful experiences of God discovering its magnificence through us, and creative mind will do the rest. So our role then is to deliberately, consciously choose, what kind of experience will God have as me today? What kind of experience will God enjoy itself through me today? Rather than getting caught up in what's going on in the news. Not that we are uncaring about our brothers and sisters, because we have arrived at a point where there is no separation, you see, because that very same life principle that is moving through you and I is moving through everything, and we have that in common. Now, I cannot enslave another. I cannot abuse another. I cannot manipulate another. I cannot steal from my brother, because we are not separate and apart. We are one. My ego sense of selfishness is gone, and my sense of hopelessness, if I ever had one, is gone, because now I realize I am a very important part of God's creation. I am here to very deliberately choose the avenues in consciousness through which the creative force will work for the purpose of a greater expression of life, a greater expression of love, a greater expression of peace. Do you think if we could choose to create the avenue in consciousness through which the creative force would flow, that hunger would be eliminated, that war would be eliminated, that disease would be eliminated? See, I believe it would. Louise Hay tells us this. So what we want to consider, what we really want to do, what I would hope that we can take away from today is a sense of belonging and a sense of recognizing just how important the part we play is, just how important it is. It is not that we are insignificant, and it is not that we are so self-absorbed that we don't care about others. It is that we are an important point in consciousness where the divine has come to realize itself, and to realize its magnificence, and to realize its creation, to celebrate its own life as us. And we have the responsibility to use that power creatively, deliberately, creatively. I think a lot of the problems that we are seeing in the world is because people have been using that power without deliberance. Right? They have just been kind of misusing it. So what we want to do is we want to accept our place in the universe. We are God's very important creation, not because of who we are, right? Not because of I, Jim, you know, not kind of an I am the greatest kind of boast. But we are a very important part of God's creation because of what we are. We are a point in consciousness where the divine has come to celebrate its own life as us. We are a point in consciousness that has the ability to choose and to decide and to create the channel through using our creative thought to create the channel through which the creative mind, the force of the universe, can flow to produce different experiences. The pain and suffering and the wars and those things that we see here in life are a result of ignorance, are a result of human beings misusing the creative power that they have been given. And you and I have the ability, through our deliberate use of the creative power, we have the ability to begin negating that ignorance. It makes no difference how long the room has been darkened. When somebody lights a candle, the darkness goes away. It can't put up a fight. It can't struggle. You can't say, well, I'm going to need a really big candle because it's been dark a long time. No, you just light the light. So let's light the light in human consciousness. Let's go forward with this sense of awe, this sense of mystery, this sense of wonder that children have. And let's recognize that what our job is to decide what magnificence will come into the world today. When we think with compassion about the hungry, about the frightened, about the sick, we can know that there's a power that can make that all go away instantaneously. That the ignorance can be dispelled. That we can bless each and every one by seeing the goodness in the God within them and let that find a way to express itself. We can decide to live our lives as spiritual beings in a spiritual universe. We can decide to use the creative thought, the power of creative thought that has been given to us for the purpose of the divine experiencing and expressing more of the goodness that it is. And we can turn our attention away from the extremes, from that which tells us that we are separate and apart and different. So I invite you this week, go forward as a child, go forward in wonder, go forward in awe. Discover the magnificence of what God is all around you. Recognize that includes you. And then include each and every one. Include each and every one in your prayer, in your knowing, in your spiritual practice. Include each and every sentient being, each and every expression of God's life. And treat everything accordingly. Treat everyone accordingly. Treat yourself with respect. Treat all whom you meet with respect. We are spiritual beings on an adventure here. We are passing through, as Fenwick did. We are passing through. There will come a day when we will leave this place, but our consciousness will persist. And we will continue on the journey of discovering just how magnificent God in its universe is. So let's not wait. Let's not wait until a time comes when we leave. Let's begin today. Let's begin now. Let's begin exploring the spiritual universe in which we live as the spiritual beings that we are, as the perfect expression of God discovering itself that we are. And so it is.